There's a bit of PowerPoint going on. Thank you very much, Bob and Daisy, for inviting me. It's lovely to be here. This will be the first talk I've given where I don't have to make you vegan. I don't know how to do this talk. I've only got one talk, it's how to make you vegan, but you're already vegan. It's okay, it just takes time to download. So, I've been going into slaughterhouses for 50 years, since I was a kid. And the reason I'm allowed in slaughterhouses is I have paper and pencil, I don't have a camera. So I talk to the staff and they can see what I'm drawing and I can give them Zachary cheese. Do you want the lights down? You can see it, right? You want lights down? Okay. Anyone need lights? Just a bit. Thank you. So the reason I'm allowed access, and I can tell you how to get into slaughterhouses if you like. You know, they always say you're not an animal rights activist, are you? And I say, I'm English. And that usually answers that question. And then they'll say, well, what's an artist want to do artwork about slaughter for? And I say, Rembrandt. Rembrandt's the ox. And they say, who's Rembrandt? And then if you really want to get into a slaughterhouse, the way to do it is first day of deer hunting. So first day of deer hunting, you show up at the slaughterhouse and you say, Fred, you find out who the manager's name is. Fred gave me permission. And they say, well, Fred's not here today because Fred's out hunting. You see, Fred didn't tell you that I got the appointment to draw, and then you get in. So I've told you basic ways. You've got to be careful. This is the Spanish version of that. You probably know Mexico is now the #1 consumer of meat, which is why China bought Smithfield on the border of Mexico. You understand it's not about making Chinese pork. It's about using the infrastructure, taxpayer infrastructure of this country. That's what they bought. So the meat producers take, the pork farmers take all the risk, Smithfield gets all the profit, and they can truck it into Mexico. So exponentially, Mexicans are consuming much more meat. This, I think this is important. This is from 1819, and it's a cartoon about universal suffrage. Now, this has nothing to do with the women's right to vote. This is to do with the men's right to vote, because previous to this, only men with property could vote, and it was seen, and it was perceived as so absurd that poor men could vote that it was as though animals got the vote. That's how absurd it seemed. So this was called the Smithfield Parliament, which is a big meat market in England, still the same today in London. And that was the absurdity. You mean poor people should vote? It was considered beyond funny. And this is how far we've got. And it will seem absurd that we ever bred animals to torture them, to then murder them. And that's going to happen very soon, that meat will be illegal. Animal products will be illegal, because it's not sustainable. It's going to happen very fast, faster than ever our wildest dreams. Trust me on this. This is my family. They've allowed me to come. They didn't want me to come. I saw the suitcase. They get, you know, they swoon, they pretend they're going to die when I'm away, we have to go through the whole, you know. That's a sofa I've never sat on, never, because pit bulls can control gravity. And you cannot, once they lie down in bed or the couch, they won't let me on the couch. So, and they get heavier and heavier and heavier. They have great skills in that. This is so old, it's called Go Vegetarian. It was a billboard I did, and the meat industry complained, so it was banned, because it was by a highway, and they said, well, children can get upset. And I said, well, children don't drive, they're going to see this and run off the road or something. But, you know, Burger King was the biggest user of this billboard, they didn't like it, so that was the end of that. But then I saw it as a tattoo on this young man in Uruguay. And then I get these in my email nearly every day, where my work is on somebody, and I think this is better than a museum. So it's like a traveling artwork. I mean, museums are just stuck, but humans move around with the work on them. I think it's wonderful. And I said, well, does your mother know you have, you know, the full, this is, if animals believed in God, the devil would look like a human being, artwork on your body. Did you get permission from your mother? And this, I imagined, if rats believed in God, it would be a bat. Because rats don't know about cladistics, so they got confused. And even I've got God as an opportunistic God, going after an insect. But I'm afraid any sort of religion or sports, I'm not interested in it. I've tried to be a Buddhist, but I'm from the Council of State in Persia. It doesn't work on me because I've got too much rage. This is my elephant series, which I won't go into. This is from Adorno. Auschwitz begins when someone looks at a slaughterhouse and says they are only animals. Isn't that an amazing quote? Because before the death camps in Germany, Göring wrote an introduction to a meat industry book in German, which was translated into English, about how to use brown shirts, young, free Nazi labor, Nazi youth, to use every part of the animal. And this was in the 1930s. So I'm not making the analogy that way, I'm making it the other way. And this is what goes on the other side of the wall. And why don't we want to look over the other side of the wall? That we can be so happy. And yet only feet away, this is happening. Whether it be the prison industrial complex, or I was brought up next to a slaughterhouse. This is my mother and I watch a pig escape from the slaughterhouse. My whole childhood was listening to the pigs scream, because behind our house was a factory farm. In other words, a small farm with sheds. And at 4 a.m. the screaming would start. And I asked my parents 2 questions. Why didn't we stop the death camps in Germany and all over Europe? And they said, we didn't know. And then my second question as a 10-year-old or 9-year-old was, but we know about the slaughterhouse next door. So why aren't we stopping it? And then my parents said, why don't you grow up? And that was it for the parental units. So I found a different family. I found my family, which is animal rights people. This is me as a young girl drawing in the slaughterhouse. It was the first slaughterhouse I went into. And I said I want to go in, I want to draw, and I was 10. And they gave me every respect. They explained the whole process. And they said, it's a peculiar thing, Sue, that we're in a sea of blood. But if one man gets one cut on his little finger, they all faint. So much about the slaughterhouse is about power and control. And when you go in a slaughterhouse, you have no power and you have no control. So for the first time in your human life, you are like the animals. You don't have a gun, you don't have a knife, you don't have their equipment. This is a drawing I did when I was a kid because the slaughterhouse was next to the school. And it was constant. And I'm so glad I looked in, because that's my mission. That's my mission for my entire life, to stop this. And the work destroys the meat industry. In my small way, this destroys it. These two diagrams, which you probably know, one is Auschwitz, and one is Temple Grandin. The meat industry knows no irony. Underneath is Lety concentration camp in the Czech Republic, which is where they took twins to go to Auschwitz for Mengele. That is now an intensive hog factory. So the site of that camp is now a hog farm. And the owners want to be bought out. The European Economic Community said, you've got to stop it, but we can't afford to pay them off. So what an outrage to the relatives, who are the Romani people, who don't eat pork. That this is there on the ashes, on the bones of their relatives. And for the neighbours next door, they said, we don't like the smell. So the same process is happening. And this, I imagine, well, this is now Animal Farm. And there is no factory farm. It's all a death camp. There's no little small family farms dealing with animal agriculture. No. This is a slaughterhouse we went into in Queens, where the health department closed the slaughterhouse because a cow escaped. And they left the animals in there for 1 week without food and water. And it was 100 degrees. And we went in, we got permission from the owner. He said, we said, if you fed and watered the animals, he said, it's closed to me by the health department. And we said, can we go in? So we got in. I remember that day, it was bright sun. And we opened the door, it was completely dark in there. And there were pyramids of animals' bodies. And on the top were the survivors. They'd stayed alive without water for a week, waiting to be rescued. And that's one of the few self-portraits I did, where I held this goose. I mean, I just took out one goose, and she was as thin as paper, and her heart beat against my heart. And under her wings, a tiny bantam chicken that she'd been with for a week, and they stayed together for the rest of their lives. The goose wouldn't go with the bantam wouldn't go with the other chickens. They stayed together. Did they have their own dreams together? They stayed together forever. Terrorists or freedom fighters. You know, every freedom fighter is called a terrorist. That's part of it. You know, the American Revolution, they were called terrorists. I just like this as art. I just like the hand over the dog's head. You know, sometimes I do good art. Most of the time it fails. Cruel, crime is economics, and the time is now. When I go into a slaughterhouse, I ask the staff, can you imagine a vegan world? And they think about that and they say, yes. Well, how come they can imagine a vegan world and HSUS can't? So they say yes, and I said, what's preventing a vegan world in your opinion? And they think, and they say culture. I like asking questions of people that have never asked anything. Wall Street wasn't, they didn't find this offensive. Animals are the 99%. Riot is a foul, I love that. Doesn't work, but sure. This one's good. Silence. Milk. This one's very popular, and I like it. It's an old trope, but it works. Yes, this is a great piece. I can't, you know, I'm just talking, just delete it. This is artificial insemination, which I call rape. It's actually after Rembrandt, which isn't important. But it was about the New York Times meat lab, where the cow was raped so many times she broke her back legs. This is the government funded, and then she died. No, that's not going to happen anymore. We must stop it. We are stopping this. This was near me, a farm in upstate New York, where the farmer got bored with it. And this is a small family farm, so beloved. He got bored with it, and he just left them in their stanchions, chained in the shed to die. When they were found, there were a few left alive. They were left to starve to death. And next door to him was hay. He had tons of food. The police killed the survivors. This is one of the largest slaughters in history in 1 week, which is in South Korea, because these pigs got hoof and mouth disease, which is not fatal to pigs. They were all buried alive, millions of them. They were buried in plastic lined pits. And you watch as the bulldozers bulldoze over them, and they're still screaming. And the neighbors would switch on their taps and blood would come out. Why? Because it reduces the value of pork. Not that it would have killed the pigs prematurely, it reduces the market value. This I put in my slideshow, dogs being boiled alive in South Korea or China. In their last moments, they're trying to get out of the boiling water. And I say, they go, oh! And what's different between this and throwing pigs in a scalding bath? No difference. So don't get all xenophobic and focus in on this. We don't have any, there's no such thing as humane slaughter. In the general public, people are most disturbed by this picture, and I have no idea why, but it's debeaking, and their tongues come out sometimes. And people come up to me, they want to know. People don't know this. Regular people in America, they don't know. Decompression chambers, this is controlled atmospheric stunning. Everything Gary said about this is correct. This is all to do with removing labor. So it's all automated, and they don't have to take them out of the cages. They can put them in these, they're structures, and it's like for us if we had the bangs. Birds have very sensitive eardrums, and their eardrums burst as they're being atmospherically decompressed. And it's all to make it cheaper. All to make it cheaper, and we must never ever align ourselves with the meat industry, with this sort of humane stunning. This is gas chambers. My friend did get arrested. She got me these photos. So one thing I haven't done yet is get into a slaughterhouse with CO2 chambers. It takes the hogs up to 90 seconds to die. You can see Sweden's done many tests on this. You can see the hogs with cameras slowly being gassed. And they climb vertically up the ceiling. They climb up walls. So my friend did get arrested. She did get me she very kindly gave me the images. Again, this is all about reducing the labor cost. If they could go 6 at a time. But you know, all the slaughterhouses in America are still single line system. But they've just got a gas chamber at the end. So it's not like it's all been changed. No. This is just to remove labor costs. What they want is full automation. And their dream, the meat industry dream, is to remove the neuron pain receptors. So that won't even be an issue anymore. They want cameras in a slaughterhouse. They want full automation. They don't want any human beings they have to pay. Well, this I just drew, full automation, with Muzak in the background. You know, I've been to nearly fully automated slaughterhouses, and they have music. Like elevator music. You know, they don't want any workers. Why have workers that you have to pay? It's annoying. This, I haven't drawn these up yet, but this is the latest slaughterhouse I've been into, and this is nearly fully automated. This is not in this country, because we have very older slaughterhouses, they will upgrade. This is in the Emirates. But it's very hard to get into this. Very hard. But I wanted to get into it for all the animal rights activists in the Emirates, of which there are many. So we're all over the world. Make no mistake. If you travel anywhere in the world, you say, take me to where the animal activists are and the artists, and you'll be safe. You'll be safe. You'll be with your family. So these are sort of out of my sketchbook what I did, and I saw these sheep from Australia, and then I went to the camel market, which was meat camels, so meat camels. This again, the crime is economics. I read the Abolition of the Slave Trade Act, which is online at the Parliament, British Parliament building. The way they did that, as far as I understand it, it's difficult to read. Abolition of the slave trade happened because the British Parliament paid the animal slavers to stop, paid the human slavers to stop it. That was done. Because they're only doing it for money. And this is how workers, animals aren't necessary anymore. We can just pack our bags and go away. Capitalism is in its final stage. In its final stage, it's the most dangerous. You understand that? In its death throes, it's the most dangerous, but it's in its death throes. And along with that will go king meat. King meat is nearly toppled. Happy meat. And I tried abolition, the message of abolition on the road. I road tested it, it works. So, you know, I've read Gary's books and I apply it. It absolutely, I've only got 30 minutes with an audience that I'll never see again, abolition works. It's simple. It is black and white. I disagree with Gary on some single issue of United Poultry Concerns that I love, but we can deal with that later. Again, I'm not saying foie gras is any worse. It's not. I was interested in foie gras because it's one of the rare examples of males. Male, gender, male being used. Majority of animals, female. I was going to make this the eater into a paedophile, but I'm not going to get that printed, so I sort of held back a little bit there. This is an homage to the cartoonist of Charlie in Paris. It was the only magazine that had animal abolition. I don't know, we can't call it animal rights anymore, I understand that. I mean, they were beautiful people to care about animals. And they're dead. This is a truck where I live in Binghamton. It's very, very cold there, and the animals are frozen to the side of the truck. This happens in transport. So they have to be electrocuted. I've seen pigs being electrocuted in the eye and in the anus to get them to move when their whole skin is frozen to the sides of trucks. And in the heat, same thing. The average animal travels 350 miles to a slaughterhouse. So it's worse now than it was in 1900 when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. Then they got off on trains. They had to, by law, stop trains to water the animals. Now it's just up to driver discretion. This is insanity. This is the meat industrial complex. And madness is a commodity they're selling. The insanity that they force on animals, the boredom and the insanity. So in some senses, when they get to be slaughtered, their suffering is over. You vegans, yeah. This is all around me in upstate New York is dairy farms. This is the young calf stolen from the mother. And I stopped with Singer when he said cows don't mourn. That's not true. These cows cry for 3 days and 3 nights. It's constant. And then they're hot-wired away from these plastic kennels where the calves are chained. These are replacement heifers, they're not real calves. So, the young calves are chained right now in freezing cold. They stand in their own shit and piss, frozen to the ground, barely alive. And then they have school groups. They have school groups come and visit. And you know what the farmer says to the school groups, the kids? Why they're chained in those sheds is that their mothers would hurt them if they were loose. Yes. Yes. These are the males that aren't even worth the price of a bullet. So they're tied to these were true, this is a true story, they're tied to a tractor, an old tractor, died. When they were rescued, the tiny percentage that were rescued, they weighed less than when they were born. This is live transport, again no worse than any other transport. The journey from Perth, Australia to the Gulf is 3.5 weeks. In those weeks, the sheep on the bottom tiers are blinded by the urine that comes down. This has nothing to do with religion. And I researched this so much, I found out the ships are registered under Meat Street in Mumbai. So it's all a joke, there's no real registration. So these are converted oil tankers, and they're like high-rise buildings. You can follow them on satellite. And I always imagine on a cruise ship, ships that pass in the night. It's constant, constant. This is mucilin, which we mentioned before, the vaginal folds are cut out of the sheep. This is 99.9% of sheep this happens to stop fly strike. Because these are millions of sheep. And you see these are like young, they're like almost lambs. And you see them often just trembling so much they can hardly stand. And on board, the lambs are minced. And the question I get from the audience is, are they given anesthetic? Well, no. They're minced alive because they were giving people in the Pacific cholera when all these sheep kept washing up on their shores. This, I'll always remember her. It was outside the slaughterhouse. It was really hot, and I drew her, and I always remember her. She's why I'm doing this. She's 1 out of billions, 1 out of trillions, and she's a person. And I couldn't save her. That's eat your own children. That's every child except for you. Eat your own children. Just makes people think. This is finning, which I thought hammerheads are more valuable because they're more fins. So there's more profit in it. And they're left to drown. They're thrown back and they drown. Yeah. This is San Francisco. This is where the fish are chosen alive. And they're just chosen like that. And they could be swimming in the Galapagos like a few hours before with all their scales of multicolours. And they're taken and they end up here and they flip off this board. And sometimes they're on the ground, still moving around with cigarette butts on the ground. And they go grey. You actually see them go grey. All the colours, they're beautiful rainbow colours going. San Francisco again. And this is long line. What long lines do, every animal gets caught in long lines. This is an obscenity. Every animal gets caught. Sorry, I should. This I saw and I couldn't rescue this one either. This is young turkeys and they're pecking this turkey to death because of a tiny spot. A tiny spot of blood. Because that's in their DNA that they peck for dirt. There's no dirt, there's no food. They're just in a big cage. And so they just peck each other to death out of the manufactured boredom and insanity of their lives. This is chickens ground up alive, because male baby chicks have no value again. No value. This is turkeys in Minnesota just being clubbed to death. They take out the sick ones and club them. This I did for my friend in Australia, Patty Mark, who does open rescue. So she goes in, she calls the police, she goes into hatcheries, she'll say there's a crime being committed here. The police come and arrest her. And she's got all the video of chickens on dead piles still alive. She's an amazing person. This is a slaughterhouse in Pennsylvania where I'm waiting with the guys and the truck's late. So they were concerned they weren't going to get paid that day. The lifespan of a meat packer before they get injured is 6 months. I only had an etching plate, so I scratched into the etching plate. I ran out of sketchbook and I saw this, and it was like the sheep were drinking the blood and water of the animals that had just been slaughtered because they'd been in a truck for 3 days. When they were unloaded at the slaughterhouse, they fell to their knees and started to drink the water and blood. And this is as though I said to you, I'm going to slaughter all of you now. All of you, and I could. Because you are the batch. You are the number of the average number that goes through in a few hours. And you would go to the farthest end of that room to get away from me. You would try and become invisible. You would start climbing up the walls to get away from me, but you can't. Because I get you one by one. And I saw as these guys took the ear. They dragged the animal by the ear. This is the oil painting. I don't really do oil paint because I am black and white. There's no grey area in this art. You are either an animal exploiter or you're a vegan. So the art should reflect that. There's no grey. This is a man I drew for a whole week in a veal slaughterhouse, organic veal in Montreal for New York City restaurants. And he said this is a joke, and he showed me, he lifted up the skin, and underneath was all the medication, still in his plastic caps. Anyway, he lost all his fingers, because his knives are so sharp, he makes 1,500 cuts an hour. This is a large slaughterhouse in New Mexico, and this is life size. So I'm asking you to look through my eyes, not to look at my eyes, but to look through my eyes at what I'm seeing. This I watched as the sheep and goats just went very small as they bleed out. They just seem to get smaller. This is a slaughterhouse in Pennsylvania. She has a broken back or a broken leg, and they leave her for the lunch break. And she's banging the sides of this steel straining pan, and she's tapping. It's like Morse code with her hoof. All her herd are there waiting with her. And then they come back, and she keeps falling, and she's never been milked because they don't care. She's going to be slaughtered at age 3 or 4. Do you know how long a cow lives? Well, you do know. It's like 32 years. At age 3 or 4, she's milked out. So her milk went with the blood down the drain in the kill floor. And I was so covered with flies, I could hardly draw. Oh, that's my friend Patty Shanker. That's when I saw Bob. He had the megaphone out in the street, and it was like 1 million people at the climate change march, and about 99% of them ate meat. And so Bob was just telling them not to. It's really good. And I made posters. This is it after, when meat's no more. It's judgment and no burger. And these are the top 10 meat industry, global meat industry criminals. This is obviously what it is. This is nice. I do sweet work sometimes. Go vegan, nobody gets hurt. And this is the last one, abolition. Abolition. Fantastic. So thank you so very much.